Thank you, Rupa Health, for putting this on. Super excited to be talking about business essentials for your functional medicine practice. This is something I've been thinking about, studying about, working with practitioners about for over 30 years. And you can be the best functional medicine practitioner. And if you don't get the business up and running, you're not going to last long. And it is the most tragic thing to see the brightest, most amazing practitioners flail around in the business model and then close their practice. We don't want that to happen. So some of you may have great business skills just intuitively, or you have some DNA in your brain that is pro business, but most of us don't. Most of the integrative medicine, functional medicine folks are anti-business and are not really good at it. And so we need to develop our skills in this area so we can be successful and help a lot of people. And this is not about making money. This is about being able to last in your practice for as long as humanly possible so you can help the most number of people possible. Okay, we already went through this, my background a little bit. And let's just jump into some of the offers that we have. There's a boot camp coming up. If you're really interested in business and this class today stimulates you and you think, I really need to focus on this, you can get a discount on our boot camp that's coming up, which is 2 months of serious business stuff to really get your practice to the next level. So you can scan that QR code if you want to join our business class. And then we have a free class too that we're offering exclusively through Rupa Health, actually. And this is a class for those of you that are brand new to functional medicine and haven't yet ordered your first lab test. You're thinking about it, but you haven't done it yet. This class is for you. So it's a huge discount. It's free. Basically, it's $1,000 discount. It's a $1,000 class. So if you're in that position, you're brand new to functional medicine, and you haven't ordered your first test through Rupa yet, you can scan this, you can join us in this class, and we'll get you started on how to order your first labs, okay? All right, and then we have this thing, and Adrian will send it out to you. This is a interactive planning worksheet. We'll send you the information on that as well. Hang on a second. You can scan it now if you want, but this is a pretty cool thing, and I'll go through in more detail on what this document is, but it's basically how you can do some financial planning. Practitioners really enjoy that quite a bit. So the learning objectives for today are to think about how you can develop a clinical model of lab testing and center the business around the labs. That's really what ends up happening in a functional medicine clinic. And we want you to see how business planning and financial planning can reduce your stress and help you be super successful in terms of helping the most people that you can. And of course, they have this old saying, if you don't have a business plan, you have a plan. It's just that you're unplanned, right? We don't want that. We want you to be mapping out your patient process. We want you to map out the patient experience. We want you to map out everything that's going to be happening in and around your clinic so you can get better results. You can generate referrals and really make this business, from a business perspective, really make the clinic work. And so then I have a bunch of worksheets and practice tips that we're going to go through today that may or may not have occurred to you. And hopefully this will provoke some thoughts on your part to get you stimulated to focus on your business, all right? Most of us don't have any business training at all. And many of us, like myself, have what I would consider like negative business training. I grew up in Berkeley, California, a super liberal family, and the whole idea of money and corporations was like a negative. And so I started my business not even really thinking that I was running a business. And it's ironic that I'm teaching these classes now because I really had to struggle with this concept and teach myself how to run my own business through a whole series of failures. And I don't want you guys to have to make that same mistake and suffer through that. I want you to be super successful. One of the good things, it's a lot different now than it was 30 years ago, is that the audience for this work is massive. There's more patients out there than any of us could handle. And all of the good practices that are well set up have wait lists forever. Okay. So the interest in this work has outpaced the number of trained practitioners, especially when you get down to practitioners who are trained in lab interpretation, which is one of the main things we do at Kalish Institute. So there's a lot of people calling themselves functional medicine docs, but they just couldn't interpret a lab to save their life. And we don't want that. We want you to have the business skills and the lab interpretation skills and the patient communication skills to really make this work. And so what is the most successful model in a sense is if you have an equal amount of time put into what I call the 3 Ps, P1, P2, P3. So P1 is you, the practitioner. P2 are your patients. And then P3 is the actual physical practice that you're running. Most of us focus almost all of our time on our patients, and we don't do enough self-care stuff, and we don't do enough education to get our skills developed. So you want to focus on yourself from a self-care perspective and from a lab interpretation and communication, patient communication perspective, and get that stuff sorted out. Then you can also focus on patients and all the patient care things that you need to figure out how to do, and put an equal amount of time and energy into your practice. And when people do these three things together, within a year or two, they're often running in a really great way. And as time develops and things go on, you have less and less energy you need to put into your practice once that business is fully built out. But in the beginning, it takes a fair amount of energy to make all that happen. So we did a survey a few years back on what are the biggest business challenges faced by functional medicine practitioners starting new practices. And you can see the number one item was finding new patients. The number two item was patient compliance and patient retention. The number three item was understanding online marketing. Number four was establishing my brand. And I'll stop there because really the first three are all the same. It's marketing and marketing. And patient retention, if you're losing patients, that means that you're not marketing properly to the patients in your practice, right? And clearly, this is something that we all struggle with. And we want you to have a solution for that so you don't have to stress about it. Okay. From clinical challenges perspective, managing complex patients, these kinds of problems. But if you're in the beginning years of your practice, you're probably mostly focused on learning the work and in need of, how could I say it? You're in need of a integrated business and clinical solution that you could implement at the same time because you're probably struggling with both of these things. How can I develop my clinical skills? How can I get a reproducible business model that's going to be profitable? And what we see with super successful practitioners, and I've coached thousands of people on this, is that you integrate those two things. The business challenges and the clinical challenges are put together into a package so that you have a clear model. And that's what avoids practitioner burnout. The more fragmented your model is, the more separate your business and clinical stuff are, the less integrated they are into a unified model, the more likely you are to burn out. And this happens frequently. Some of you may actually be experiencing burnout. Research shows that it's 80+% of people in our field and healthcare in general are burned out or at max capacity. And we completely want to avoid that. You're not going to be able to heal people if you're in a burned out phase, right? And so part of the avoidance of this, and if you're not burned out, more power to you. So just think about this as a strategy to avoid even ever getting there, is to understand what you're the best at, what you really love to do, and how that matches or intersects or overlaps with what drives your economic engine, what's going to build you to allow you to make money, right? And so if you can find something that you're super passionate about that generates a really great income, then you've got it made and you'll avoid burnout completely. We see people who are super passionate about what they do, but they're not making the money that they need and they can burn out, or people that end up doing something that's not really their passion. And that's just not going to lead to overall satisfaction throughout time. And burnout typically hits somewhere around years 10 to 12. This is pretty predictable. In the earlier years, you're building your practice, you're learning the new stuff. Years 5 to 10, there's like a growth phase where you're adding maybe some specialties. You've got a really good revenue base, but you're thinking about expanding it. And then ideally, at that 15 to 20-year mark, you're thinking about new goals, you're thinking about work-life balance. You want to cut back on your practice maybe a little bit so you can do some other projects. And if you're healthy and you pay attention to the three P's, to your practice, your patients, and yourself, then you can transition through all these different phases without hitting burnout ever. And that's really what our goal is. And so I've studied this, unfortunately, by learning from doctors who are burned out and whose practices are failing. And this is like a list of what you don't want to do, right? And you can, if you haven't made these mistakes yet, completely avoid all of these things just by knowing about them. Number one, maintaining your own health and your own well being, keeping your clinical skills sharp and developing them, and making sure that you can communicate really well with patients. That just absolutely guarantees success. You can even be a pretty mediocre practitioner. And if you have great communication skills, patients are going to love you and they're going to come back and you're going to get people better. Okay. So a lot of this really develops or is built around what our people skills are. And then how does that work? That's predicated on your physical, your emotional, and your own spiritual development. People pick up on that stuff. If you're emotionally bereft, spiritually in crisis, and physically falling apart, patients aren't going to be attracted to come to your practice. So that's the P1, right? That's the taking care of yourself, the practitioner. That's really what sets the foundation for a super successful practice. You have to have that. And if you're not eating well, you're not exercising enough, you don't feel like your emotional life is doing great, and you don't have a spiritual practice and you're not spiritually developing, then you want to put some time and energy into focusing on those things. And I know that seems a little remote from the business, but it's what you're selling. You're selling healing. And if you're not able to heal yourself and be in a healing mode yourself, then this whole business model completely falls apart. So then you also need to find patients that are the right fit for what you want to do. Okay. And we don't want to ever turn people away, and we're not trying to be exclusive in any way, but you want to make sure that you're attracting the right people that you can help. Somebody was joking about this the other day. If you're in Alaska, which some of you may be, and you have a practice in like northern Alaska where it's really cold, and you decide that you want to specialize in golf professionals and teaching golf people, have people how to play golf and to stay healthy and fit and do their nutrition, that's a bad fit, right? Because there's not a lot of golf courses in Alaska. So you want to make sure that you're matching your passion to the reality that surrounds you, and you then will be able to easily attract the right people. And then the last bullet point on here is the reproducible business model and treatment model. And this is what I was saying earlier. If you can integrate the business model and your treatment model together, be super clear on the services that you're offering, have a very detailed and specific patient process flow, and have a patient experience that you're curating from beginning to end, then you're going to be right where you want to be every day of your practice life. And the more that these things are separated from one another, more that your business model is not paid attention to, or the more that you overly focus just on patient care and you don't put enough energy into running your clinic, the more likely the whole thing is to fall apart. And sadly, the more likely you are to get burned out as well. Okay. So there's 5 elements here that you want to pay attention to. The first is creating a niche. We'll go through these individually. The next one is weekly business planning. I hate that. But every Friday, just force yourself to spend an hour or two doing business planning. And if you don't even know what that means, you can download that spreadsheet that we're giving out for free as part of this class, and you can look at that and try to figure that out. If you can't figure out how to use an Excel spreadsheet, then call a friend or someone that's a bookkeeper or something like that. They can step you through how to actually do that. So business planning is financial planning, it's business planning, it's all that stuff wrapped together. But you need to do that typically an hour a day. If that's too much, like an hour or two every Friday, something along those lines. Okay. And then you want to work on your communication skills. That's a whole nother thing. That's more about interpersonal skills and how you interact with your patients. And then operations, logistics, and then having a support network, including a coach and all the different people that can support you. So I want to talk about these things individually. So picking a niche is really important. Your niche can be broad. So your niche could be as narrow as just Hashimoto's patients, or your niche could be children or all adults or all men and do men's health, or all women, or it could be a general practice. But for many of us, the niche is going to encompass the areas that we're the most interested in. It could be chronic illness, it could be wellness, it could be athletes. Having a niche explains, is informed by, maybe is the term, or is it explains your personality and your passion and your interest in this work. And if you want to work with everybody, that's fine. But the more specific you are in the niche, the more successful people tend to be. When I first started my training program in 2006, one of my first students was this guy named Dave, and he he just outthought me entirely. So he took my training program, spent a year getting trained. And at the end of that, he told me, I'm just going to work with H. pylori. And I was like, what? This whole idea of a niche that narrow, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea, Dave. And he's like, I'm going to do it. And he ended up having the most successful practice you could possibly imagine on an international basis, just working with people with H. pylori. It turns out if you're good at internet marketing, there's a lot of people throughout the planet that have H. pylori, more people than he could ever handle. So you could be super specific like that if you want and be very successful. And that's what he was passionate about. That was his problem that he had cured that led to his health miracle. And that's what he wanted to spend the rest of his career focusing on. Okay. At the same time, you also want to focus on the right patients as you're building up your practice to ask for referrals for. So if you have, this is a classic thing that happened to me maybe 10 or 15 years ago, is I had a Parkinson's patient and I helped him dramatically. And in fact, we reversed his Parkinson's, which is a big deal. And he ended up telling everybody in the Parkinson's patient community that I was like this guy. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to my practice because I couldn't reproduce that, right? It's not something that you can do every day. And so you want to make sure that the referrals that are coming into your clinic are people that you know you can help that are within the realm of what you want to be focusing on. And whether or not you want to work on the hardest patients or easy patients, you want to plan that out, let's say. Okay. And then at some point, we're healers and we're working on a very deep emotional and spiritual connection level. And it's very difficult to separate yourself from that and to look at your practice as a business and patients as customers. But once a week for an hour or two on Friday, if you do that, you'll have the time and energy to really focus on building the practice. And that's going to be what helps prevent you from burning out, which will allow you to be in practice for longer. So my niche when I first started my practice was what I call the big five, which is fat, fatigue, depressed, female hormones, and GI problems. So that was my niche for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. I liked it. What's not on here is Parkinson's disease. What's not on here is mold or Lyme disease. These are relatively lightweight, easy to deal with types of cases. Fat, fatigue, depressed, female hormones, and GI issues, things that I could fix quite easily. And this ran my practice for, again, 10 or 15 years. People outside of whatever your niche is, as you define it, are going to find you also, right? So it's not like I ever turned anyone away. But whenever I did any kind of marketing or lectures, these were the things that I focused on. So in terms of the most common errors, and I say this up in pretty much in every talk, if you guys have heard me speak before, you've probably heard this, but you can't hear it enough times, which is that you do not need to only work with the most difficult patients. You can choose the specific patient population that you want to work with. And if you don't choose the specific patient population you want to work with, it's going to be chosen for you. And I have seen many practitioners in my age group. I'm 59 years old now, been in practice for 31 years, whatever. I've seen many people along this journey in the last 30 years who ended up falling into a specialty that they hated. And it took a decade or so for them to even figure out that was happening. All of a sudden, they wake up one day and they're not happy with what they're doing. And then we're into that burnout that we're trying to avoid. Okay. So you don't want to have a niche that you love and then just leave that on the side and go do something else. If you just absolutely love working with kids, you should work with kids. If you just want to work with women who want to get pregnant, then you should work with that group. You should work with where your passion is because that's always going to lead to the best business result, hands down, no matter what. So once you choose your niche, how do you actually build that out? A lot of this is to do with just your communication with the outside world, right? How you're going to find groups to do talks with, to do free webinars with. In my case, I spent a decade focusing on female hormones, and I did female hormone lectures and webinars and talks. I wrote a book about it, and that was just my whole spiel, and it worked out really well. We had, the entire focus of the practice was around correcting female hormone problems. We got a lot of men in the practice as well and other kinds of patients, but all of our outbound marketing, that's really what was it about. And in your case, in the modern world with all the digital stuff, you want to think about your website, your YouTube channel, those different social channels that you may use, the blog that you should for sure have on your website, so that you're pushing out information around the niche that you want on a regular basis. And on Fridays, after you do your hour or two of business planning, you spend another hour or two doing your content development. And you write your blog, you do your 10-minute video, you post all the social stuff, you get all that going. You call up or email the different partners that you may want to work with. And if you have a consistent set of content that's going out on a regular basis, that is around your niche and around the area that you want to focus on, then people are going to start to find you, because when they're searching online for female hormones, San Francisco, California, and functional medicine, you'll be the first person that pops up, right? So you don't have to pay a lot for this kind of marketing. It's the essential thing that you have to do every week, though, right? A blog post, a short video, like a 5 or 10 minute video, some kind of social stuff that you're pushing out, whatever you're using, Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the heck you're using right now, and then offering free webinars on a regular basis. And the vast majority of patients that come into my practice today, they find me on YouTube. They find a video that I did about H. pylori, whatever, and they decide that I'm the great doctor for that particular problem, and then they come in. So I haven't paid for marketing in the 30 years that I've been in practice ever, because it's always been this outbound content, education, patient education stuff going out to the world that brings the patients in. Okay. Overpaying for marketing is one of the most common problems that we see, by the way. You're not going to solve marketing issue by throwing a ton of money at it. You just need to generate really good content to make that work. So weekly business planning, our favorite thing to do, is learning how to build financial and business models. So Adrian and Rupa will send you a link. We have the QR code coming up in a minute too, for our financial planning document, which is a spreadsheet that'll step you through how to set up all your income on page 1. And then that data is thrown over to page 2. And page 2 allows you to build out all your expenses. So you can run 5 or 10 different financial models. If I see this many patients and my expenses are here, how much do I make? And figure all that stuff out ahead of time so that you have a really clear financial plan that's going to be coordinated with or a part of your business model, your business plan. And then by far, the most common thing that we see that completely disrupts the practice is high overhead. And so if your overhead is low, even if your income is quite modest, you're going to be extremely profitable and do well. And there's a lot of successful clinics out there that are bringing in a lot of cash with really high overhead. And those people are just getting crushed because they're working so hard and they're just not able to bring in the financial rewards at the end of the day that they need. So the real key to running the practice is low overhead. And I was taught that 30 years ago by Lenny Coco. And of course, the first thing I did was go out and build a huge integrative medicine clinic in San Diego. It's 3,000 square feet. We had 8 treatment rooms. I'm not making this up, I built a gym, like a gym in the back. And we had a personal trainer back there. We had a guy measuring brain waves. I had a psychiatrist. I had a psychologist. I had an acupuncturist. I had a nutritionist. I built this massive clinic and we made tons of money coming in. Millions of dollars were coming in, like $1 million or more were coming in. And the overhead was like 90% of the income. So we may have brought in $1 million, but we spent 950,000 of it. And so that was not a very successful model. It was really fun, but from a business perspective, it was just a disaster. And of course, I worked so hard making that whole thing happen that I burned out. So we don't want you guys to do that. Keep the overhead low. And that's really the ultimate key to making this model work. Okay. And again, margins should be between 40 and 60%. Hopefully, you know what a margin is. If you don't, you should look that up. Okay. And when you're first starting out, obviously, you're going to have more expenses as your practice matures. You should have fewer expenses. If you're doing a telehealth practice, you may even be able to keep your profit margin in an even better range than that. But these are typical ranges, assuming you have some staff and whatnot. And one of the biggest keys to low overhead is using technology. Okay. And this is one of the reasons when I first saw Rupa, I was all simultaneously angry and frustrated that I hadn't seen this in the past. And I was thinking, after 20 years of doing my own lab distribution, finally a company is here. And then when I started to use Rupa, I was so happy because they solved what had been one of the biggest problems in my clinic. If you run a large functional medicine clinic and you're testing, let's say 50 patients a month, how many labs that is? That's a couple hundred labs minimum per month coming in and out of your clinic. And to distribute that takes a half-time to almost full-time employee. And it's a lot of work and a lot of mistakes happen. And when Rupa came along, I just realized, whoa, they completely fixed one of the major problems to running a big office. And the amount of all the technology that I have implemented in my clinic in the last 30 years, putting Rupa in instantly lowered the overhead more than anything else I'd ever done. Immediately cut out like 36 or $37,000 a year of expense. Just boom like that. Because we didn't have to have, and because I didn't have to pay an employee to do all this. And they did the job better. Okay. So anytime you see something like Rupa or you see a online supplement distributor, anybody that's doing this stuff, you should get mad and frustrated that you're doing it the old fashioned way, and you should immediately change to this new technology. That lowering of your overhead is the key to preventing you from burning out and the key to you having a decent profit margin in this whole thing. It's getting easier and easier to be successful in functional medicine as these companies are coming along and developing these technological solutions for us, okay? Because the main expense for this whole endeavor that you're going to do is your staff time. And anything you can do to reduce staff time is going to be how you reduce your overhead. All right. That's the most important thing. Let me say that one more time. I don't have a slide on this. I probably should. The largest expense you're going to have to run this operation is employee time, is your staff time, paying your staff a living wage. And so anything that you can do to lower that cost is going to lower your overhead. And that's what's going to be allowing you to have more time to take care of yourself and to not burn out. That's the key to doing all this. By far the largest expense is going to be employees. Okay. All the other stuff kind of pales in comparison to that. Pillar number 3, patient communication skills. This is just basically learning how to talk with people, learning how to convince them that they should buy a lab kit, learning how to interpret the labs when they come back. It's understanding how educating the patient is really empowering the patient and is really creating the circumstances by which they're going to heal. We're not doing the healing to them, but we're educating them in such a way that the healing process is initiated. That's really how I see that now. And the better that you can communicate with people, the more effective you will be at doing this. Now, some people have just great communication skills. That's amazing. Some people are just born with that, or their parents teach them how to be like that. Me, not so much. I had mediocre to bad communication skills when I was in my 20s. It's just, I don't know. I just didn't really learn how to understand people's emotions and listen to what they were saying and reflect back what they were saying. But it's something that you can learn how to do. It's a skill you can learn. And I was trained in doing this by Dr. Glenn Frieder. Thank you, Glenn, out there, who was one of the original mentors that I had. And he spent maybe 2 or 3 years teaching me how to communicate with patients really effectively. And that in and of itself then becomes the main driver of your income and the different sales that you have. And if you're great at interpreting labs, or you're really great on the science behind this work, but you can't communicate that to people, then your business is going to suffer for that. Okay. There's one particular moment in time when patient communication is put to the ultimate test, which is when you're interviewing or speaking to the new patient for the first time. And there's a series of events that you should go through. The first one is developing the rapport with the patient. And if you don't do that, then the whole thing is going to be over and they won't come back. And in order to develop rapport, you have to come from, you could think of it as like a vibration, higher vibrational place or a higher energy place or a healthier place than the patient is in. So before you get into the patient treatment room, or before you pick up your headset, if you're doing like a Zoom consultation or whatever, you need to put yourself into a place where your internal vibration, your sense of well-being, your brain waves are in a zone that is healing in and of itself. You can't be scattered. You can't be like chewing on the last bite of your burrito. You can't be checking your email like 2 seconds before the patient walks in. You need to be coming from a real place of healing, and then the patient will see that's what's happening, and then they will tell you what's going on, and that's how you develop rapport. So rapport starts with you and your internal state of being, where your brain is at, where your brain waves are at. And then if you're in that healing place, then it's going to go well. And then The next step is explaining to the patient what you think is going on. I call this the condition description technique. We get into this in detail in that free class that I was talking about earlier. Basically how to explain the patient on the labs and how you can run these lab tests to understand how to correct their problems, in short. So pillar number 4, my least favorite, but we have to talk about this, is operations and logistics. Just saying that is hard for me, but you can't ignore this because this is like the mechanics that are running the business. This is like a very important aspect to the whole thing. So you want to make sure that you explore your patient process flow so you can see where patients need more follow-up and where patients are dropping out. You need to have systems for doing all of this, okay? And many practices have plenty of new patients coming in, but their real problem is in retention. People aren't sticking around. So you want to develop a step-by-step patient process flow where you are having a structured response to each one of these sections here. When the patient emails or calls your office and says, "What does Dr. Kalish do?" You need to have a script that answers that. When you have a new patient consult set up, you need to make sure that the person has bought their labs. When they've bought the labs, you need to make sure that they've done the labs and are coming in to do a lab review consult and so on. So you want to map out whatever that process is for your clinic and make sure that you have email follow-up and staff follow-up on each one of these steps. So if a patient falls out at some place, you're easily able to recognize that immediately and push them on to the next step. Okay. And the more that you can do that patient process flow, the more cohesive your practice will be. And then this is like a old school Silicon Valley saying, which is that you want to sell to your install base, meaning that the customers that you already have, current patients, are going to be the ones that really fuel the growth of your practice. If they come back and they stay with you and you will work on different problems with them, you don't really need that many new patients if you're continuing to work with the same people that originally came in to your practice over time. Okay. And then the fifth pillar here is all the different professionals that you need. I made this slide up a while ago and I was like, whoa, is this really true? But yeah, I have a CPA, a bookkeeper, an attorney. I have 2 attorneys, probably 3 actually, IP attorney, contracts attorney, a bunch of different attorneys. You need financial advisors, pension and retirement planners. You need a business coach. If you don't have a business coach, you're dead in the water. You need business advisors. Those are like friends that are going to advise you for free. And you need your right-hand person, consigliere kind of person, like in The Godfather, who's just going to have your back. There's a whole wide group of people that are going to end up being on your payroll. Unfortunately, you have to pay these people to keep the business going. And then, equally important, are the unpaid folks. Okay. The business friends, the people that you meet with every Friday in the afternoon after you've done your business planning to talk about it so that you have a community of support with friends, business associates, people maybe who are in a practice similar to yours, or someone who's just a local person that has an interest in your business that you can have frank business discussions with so you can grow the business in an integrated way. And then on the personal side, your fitness, your own physician, your meditation, your spiritual teacher. Farmer John is the guy down the street we get our vegetables from. That's actually his name. We call him Farmer John. I think it's funny, but his really name is John, but he grows the best vegetables in Northern California. We get all our fresh produce from him. Making sure that you have a setup so that you're healthy and able to sustain your own personal well-being, right? That's an important part of this whole game that we're playing here so you can stay in this. So we've got some extra slides here I'm going to skip through so we have plenty of time for questions, but I want to get to the tips. So make sure you keep your margins between 40 and 60%. That's the low overhead part of all this. Get the right staff in place. And the biggest expense you're going to face is staff. You need to pay people well, for sure. You need to pay people a living wage and make sure they're happy with their income. But you want to make sure you get the right person in the right job and that you don't have excessive staff costs because that's going to really ruin you. IT systems like Rupa, like online scheduling are key. Again, that's going to help you lower your overhead the more efficient you are with your IT. And then having a business coach, going to business seminars. If you haven't been to a business seminar this year, take my Business Essentials Bootcamp. We're giving you guys a deal on it. And do those things regularly, right? You need to always have some sort of business person in the back of your mind speaking to you so that you stay focused on that. Otherwise, it's just going to drift away. Your attention to that will drift away, and that's not a really great thing. Okay. And then realizing that your business model is as important as your clinical model. It's not like you can just be the best clinician and a horrible business person, and this is going to work out. You need to integrate those two things together. And just a couple of last thoughts here on different models. And I just want to throw these out as examples. I don't think anyone's going to follow these, but just so you can start to think about, hey, what's my model? I want to develop a model. One model is the niche practice that we talked about earlier, where you're just working with diabetic patients, you're just working with athletes, whatever that niche may be. That's an option, okay, to build a lab-oriented business. You can also, and this is my favorite option, this is what I'm doing now, have a longevity clinic. What the heck? Working with people who want to stay healthy forever. Genetic testing is super fun to do that. Keeping people who are engaged in the world happy and healthy. And it's not a sickness model, it's really a wellness model. That's been really fun for me in the last year or two. And then as you're building out whatever your model is, and again, there's financial planning and business planning involved in all this. We want to make sure that you have a literal checklist where you're going through, did I do my financial planning this week? Did I do my business planning this week? What's happening with my operations and logistics? Is there anything I can do to lower my overhead? Is it worth me spending this money on that or not? So you're having the business part of your brain working away for a couple hours every Friday, making sure if you don't have this, I'm assuming a lot of you already have this, but you set up a Rupa account and you're ordering a test on yourself. This is the P1 thing. This is the keeping you healthy. If you don't know what test to order, just order an adrenal lab on yourself if you haven't done one the last year or two. Almost every healthcare practitioner that we do that with is stressed out. Put yourself on an adrenal program based on your adrenal lab. If that's not of interest, check your microbiome, but make sure that you're spending some time every week, every month, every year, really focusing on yourself. And in my practice and the way that I teach the courses at the Chaos Institute, we really focus on adrenals and GI and organic acids or metabolomics testing. So if there's one of those you haven't done on yourself in the last year or so, run a lab. I just ran my whole set of labs recently, and it's just, oh, okay, that's a reminder for all the things that I need to do. Okay, so we want you taking care of yourself. And if you're getting into lab ordering, want to make sure that you have a model, right? So again, I go by the adrenal, GI, and organic acids model. You can make up your own model. I personally like this one a lot. And I have a system. Again, we have a business system, right? Here's the business, adrenal, GI, and organic acids testing. But it's tied into a clinical model, which is the concept that when we're stressed, screws up our neuroendocrine system, screws up our GI tract, and we become toxic. So this clinical model integrates perfectly with the business model, which is running the adrenal, GI, and metabolomics testing. And that's what you want to ultimately do is have your clinical model and business model yoked together in a really concrete way. Okay, so again, I like to start with adrenal labs. You may have another choice there for yourself. And we're going to skip through some of these so we have more time. Okay, and a couple of things that you can scan. This is the worksheet. If you want to do some financial planning every Friday, fill out one of these every Friday. Okay, you can scan that and we'll send out links to you. Adrian will do that. If you want to spend the next couple months in the new year focusing on your business, you can join our business boot camp. Okay, we'll be starting that in mid-January.
Hi, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this class. If you're a practitioner, make sure you go sign up at rupahealth.com. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.